Karishma Vaswani. Thanks for watching. If you want to find out more about the climate and the economy, do go to the BBC News website and join us for the next edition of Talking Business.
There's the odd shower dotted about this evening, but actually a lot of dry weather out there. Windy though in northwest Scotland, and that's going to stay the case through the night and into the first part of tomorrow. Some gusts, Western Isles in particular, in excess of 50 miles an hour, and some showers running out through Irish Sea coasts as we go through the night. But as you can see, a lot of dry weather to be had, a little bit cooler than this in the countryside. And if it's dry and clear for many overnight, it'll be fine first thing in the morning with some early sunshine. Still a few showers in the west. If you're close to the low pressure in northwest Scotland, especially into the Western Isles, still very windy with some outbreaks of rain. We're in northeast England for the Great North Run. Well, the weather shouldn't worry you. I know some runners like it wet. It won't be that, but it's not going to be particularly warm. Just a chance of a late day shower for the stragglers. As we look at things beyond that, tomorrow we're going to see some rain coming into Cornwall and Devon. A risk of gales here to end the day. Showers developing Northern Ireland. They're into western Scotland, but for much of eastern Scotland it is looking fine here and across a large part of northern England, into the West Midlands, into Wales. You've got variable cloud, some sunny spells, the warm spots reaching into the high teens. Risk of a shower southern coastal Wales to end the day, but it's looking wet into Cornwall, parts of Devon with this strengthening wind. And there's another weather system here producing some outbreaks of rain into the far southeast and parts of East Anglia, the East Midlands into the afternoon. But as you can see, it is looking good for the cricket. Last one-day international, England, Australia, the big decider at Old Trafford. Looks like there will be plenty of play, a fine afternoon here. Now, as we go through the evening, I just want to point out the winds again with these gales in parts of southwest England, especially along the coast and other parts of the south coast, potentially going into Monday as an area of low pressure moves in. It looks like on Monday that will target England and Wales with the heaviest downpour, still some bright spells in between. Further showers scattered about the UK on Tuesday as that area of low pressure moves away, but then another one, as you can see, coming in, and this with some energy of a former tropical storm, so that could boost the rainfall potentially on Wednesday with the risk of gales around this as well. So some potentially at times this week disruptive weather to keep our eyes on. Yes, it will be wet and windy at times, but there'll also be some dry and sunny weather occasionally too. That's it for now.
Where's the man? The man took this. Where's the battery charger for?
You're watching BBC World News Today, broadcasting in the UK and around the globe. I'm Peter Dobby. The headlines.
251.
The Labour Party elects the veteran left-winger Jeremy Corbyn as its new leader. In turn, it calls on the government to do more to help Europe's migrants.
We as ordinary decent people stand up and say to our government, recognise your obligations in law.
Rallies are being held across Europe, including London, in support of the migrants. An investigation's been ordered into why a crane collapsed, killing 107 people in the Grand Mosque in Mecca. Also coming up, a British-funded memorial to those killed and tortured by British forces in Kenya has been unveiled in Nairobi. Welcome to the programme. The veteran left-wing British Member of Parliament, Jeremy Corbyn, was today swept to victory in the Labour Party leadership election contest. Mr Corbyn, who 3 months ago began the campaign as an outsider, won massive support with nearly 60% of the vote. That was way ahead of his nearest rival, Andy Burnham, who secured just under 20%. Mr Corbyn thanked Mr Burnham and the other candidates, Liz Kendall and Yvette Cooper, saying they'd helped to reinvigorate the party. And he promised to fight for a more tolerant and inclusive Britain. Our political editor, Laura Koonsberg's report does contain some flash photography.
He's in there somewhere. The new Labour leader who wants to be your next Prime Minister. They knew it. he knew it. These rivals and the Labour establishment lost the argument.
Jeremy Corbyn elected as leader of the Labour Party.
This humble rebel had to be persuaded even to stand, yet 250,000 people named him their first choice. Months ago that seemed impossible. By this morning the only surprise was the scale of his support. A new suit, maybe, but ideas he's held for decades.
We don't have to be unequal. It doesn't have to be unfair. Poverty isn't inevitable. Things can and they will change. Thank you very much.
But many of these MPs' politics are so far from his, they will not grin and bear it. 7 of the shadow cabinet have already resigned.
He's done it not by a small margin, but by a mile, a thumping victory. The unexpected candidate is now Labour's accidental leader.
This is an enormous achievement.
Can you believe that you've won by such a margin? Can you give a brief word to the audience as to who voted for you?
But his face betrays how brutal the coming months may be. But tonight, euphoria. These are his people. Nearly 100,000 of them signed up just to back him. A new audience for the ideas of old Labour. And some of tonight's biggest smiles were from vintage faces. He told me he hadn't been so happy in years.
People are sick and tired of the last 30 years in which ordinary people got left behind while the bankers made a fortune.
What do you make of the
Jeremy's
scale of the
gonna change
result,
it.
Ken?
Just stunning. No one could have predicted. Oh, he will. With the majority like this, they'll have to. Oh, dear.
Corbyn and his new deputy, Tom Watson, triumphed under new party rules. Ed Miliband's real legacy, perhaps. Labour in the hands of its supporters, not its MPs.
Our party is a broad church, always has been, always will be, and the task of the leader is to reach all parts of that movement, and I believe that's what Jeremy should do.
He could only have dreamt of this.
Fantastic moment, fantastic mandate for change in Britain, fantastic enthusiasm for real democratic politics. It's a great day.
To our party membership to be even bigger. It's already now become the largest membership ever in the history of the Labour Party.
An overwhelming moment for his supporters. Overwhelming too for his wife.
We walked together, we marched together down that road.
But look who came to join the party. The most powerful union boss in the land, Len McCluskey. One of the first to embrace him on stage.
This is unlike anything the Labour Party has seen for decades. The passion, the faith, the joy in what they've achieved in this room. Can they ever persuade the whole nation they have the right answers?
They are convinced these lyrics could become familiar again. The red flag, Labour's old song. But could the rest of us ever join in?
Do you think that the general public would choose Jeremy Corbyn as a Prime Minister?
Well, we'll have to see, won't we? But, you know, what they do want is politicians of conviction. People who say what they mean. They are sick to death of people coming on looking like they're reading off a script. Well, that's clearly not Jeremy Corbyn.
Away from the crowds, one cool Labour head told me it's unpredictable, exciting or fatal. Whether you think it's a glorious fantasy or a nightmare for Labour, it is now real. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, let's stay with that story. Taking you live now to College Green. Our political correspondent Ella Garnier is there for us. Eleanor, how does he make Labour electable at the next election?
The very big question and the task that Jeremy Corbyn now has on his hands. I think it's fair to say that by this morning everyone was saying that it was going to be Jeremy Corbyn who was going to be the new Labour leader. But what was the big surprise was his overwhelming victory. It was a thumping victory. He won with nearly 60% of the vote. And Jeremy Corbyn himself even admitted that he was a bit surprised by the scale of his victory. And now, as you point out, he's got some serious challenges years ahead of him. How to get Labour back in power again. The next election here in the UK is in 2020, but there's going to be plenty of work to do before we get to that point for Jeremy Corbyn. And it's really interesting to point out that Jeremy Corbyn has no experience at this level of government at all. He hasn't ever held a shadow ministerial position or even a shadow Secretary of State position. He has spent the last 30 years working here as a Member of Parliament, but he has always been on the back benches. In fact, he's always been a bit of a rebel. He has voted against his party, against Labour, more than 500 times. Now he is leading the Labour Party, and he hasn't shown previous leaders any loyalty, really. So now the big challenge is, well, can he expect the party faithful to be loyal to him?
Interesting, Eleanor, you talked there about previous leaders. I mean, famously he said Tony Blair should be tried for war crimes because of what's gone on in the Middle East. What was it that Mr Corbyn offered that cancelled out so many internationally well-known voices saying he is not the man to lead Labour? Tony Blair famously, just 4 or 5 weeks ago, saying if you vote him in to run the party, it will be annihilation for Labour.
Yes, that's right. Tony Blair spoke out 3 times during the Labour leadership campaign, saying that if you voted for Corbyn, it would be annihilation, as you say. He also said that if you had sympathy, if your heart was with Jeremy Corbyn, well, then you needed a heart transplant, Tony Blair said. What has appealed to so many of the thousands and thousands of people who have joined up to Labour as new members, as supporters, is his straight talking. People like the fact that he doesn't look like the other leading politicians in this country. He dresses differently, he sounds differently, and he wants to do things differently as well. In fact, the first thing he did today, having been elected, was to go to a very big rally in central London, just behind me here, in support of refugees from across Europe. So we are already starting to see that this is going to be a very different type of leadership, but we will find out more over the next few days.
Eleanor, thanks very much. Well, the new Labour Party leader here in the UK, Jeremy Corbyn, was speaking at that rally in London that Eleanor was talking about in support of migrants, just one of many protests held today in several European cities. This is the scene earlier today in the British capital, where thousands of pro-refugee supporters gathered in Hyde Park. They marched towards Downing Street to lobby the British Prime Minister, David Cameron. Organisers said it was time to let refugees know that they're welcome in Europe. Along with London, the biggest rally was held in Copenhagen, where an estimated 30,000 people gathered outside the Danish Parliament to voice their support for the refugees, many chanting in English. Say it loud and say it clear, refugees are welcome here, they said. And in Madrid, under a slogan which read, "Welcome refugees," huge numbers marched on the capital's Atocha railway station to the Foreign Ministry, calling on the Spanish government to welcome refugees into Spain. I've been talking with Abdulaziz Al-Mashi. He is the co-founder of the Syria Solidarity Movement. He organised the pro-refugee rally in London earlier today. He told me that European countries opening their doors to refugees was the right thing to do.
Politicians within the UK and in Europe must listen to their people and must let people in, because a refuge is a right, not a privilege. And those people are fleeing wars. For example, I am a Syrian. In my country, we have a dictatorial regime who is carrying out massacres against the Syrian people on daily basis since 2011. So the international community did not do anything to stop him. He is using parallel bombs, even chemical attacks, like on daily basis. So obviously the people will flee. And if you don't intervene to stop it, you have to take in refugees.
There are, can I suggest to you, huge practical issues here. 800,000 people getting into Germany up to this point in this year alone. 40,000 expected in certain countries between today and tomorrow Sunday. Practically, how do those people get looked after? Where do they go? And crucially, when or can they go home?
I will tell you something. They cannot go home at the moment. Because if you look at Syria, Syria has been totally destroyed. This is the reality. So this is the consequences of the inaction from the international community. If you let a dictator carry out massacres against his own people on a daily basis, he used even chemicals, then obviously the people will leave.
Abdul Aziz Al-Mashi talking to us earlier. Well, as the political debate over how to handle the migrant crisis continues across Europe, a war of words between Austria and Hungary now over the migrant crisis escalated today. The government in Budapest summoned the Austrian ambassador after his country's Chancellor Werner Faymann criticised the Hungarian Prime Minister's treatment of refugees, saying that, quotes, Orbán is acting irresponsibly when he says everyone is an economic refugee. He went on to say putting refugees on trains in the belief that they're going somewhere totally different awakens memories of our continent's darkest times, an apparent allusion there to the Nazi treatment of Jews during the Holocaust. The German Vice-Chancellor Sigmar Gabriel has also been critical of the Hungarian response. He renewed calls for a European solution to the crisis.
When you see the pictures of how Hungary's president, Mr. Orbán, treats the people there, they don't get any food or water. Small kids stay in police stations. People really fear for their lives. You can understand why our government has said, unless we want to see pictures of sick, injured and even dead people at the borders of Europe, we must take action and let them come to Austria and Germany.
In other news, at least 82 people have been killed in a gas explosion at a crowded restaurant in Madhya Pradesh in India. Police say a cooking gas cylinder blew up and then triggered a second blast of mine detonators stored illegally next to the restaurant. Around 100 people have been injured in the blast, which caused the building's roof to cave in. Sanjoy Madhumja is in Delhi with more.
Well, it took place in the morning in this town in central India in Madhya Pradesh state. Very crowded at the time because the restaurant itself was packed with people, office goers and a lot of school children having breakfast. It was also in a fairly crowded location. I understand there was a bus station nearby as well, and that's the reason there were so many people at the time. As you say, the police say a gas cylinder used for cooking first exploded and then apparently set on fire several explosives that were stored nearby. We're not quite sure whether they were stored in the restaurant or in an adjoining building, and those set off more explosions leading to a massive fire. It's a two-story building which their hands to sift through the rubble to try and get to
That's fine.
Two British women have been
Can you
killed
turn it off now?
as a train
I want to use
derailed
the
in northern
TV now.
India. The tourists were travelling on a specially chartered train carrying a group of 37
You want to use it
from
too?
the Indian Himalayan town of Shimla.
You've been using it the whole
York-based
day.
Great Rail Journeys, who organised the tour, said a number of people in the group had been hospitalised.
Let me see.
The Saudi authorities have ordered an investigation.
Give me some bread, really bread.
You've
eaten rice.
The Grand Mosque in Mecca.
You're even lucky.
More than 100 people were killed in what is
You're even lucky at that.
sacred sites. Images from the scene
I gave you
bodies
food.
in the rubble and blood on the mosque's polished floors. The crane's collapse has been blamed
You
on
ate
high winds
rice.
during a storm. The
Come on.
accident happened as preparations were being made for this month's Hajj pilgrimage, which officials say will go ahead as planned. Do stay with us here on World News Today with me, Peter Dobby. Still to come, sports news, including Serena Williams' shock defeat to Roberta Fici in the US Tennis Open to provide an all-Italian final.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning, and freedom will be defended. The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible.
Bishop Tutu
Hey,
now
Mummy,
becomes
now
spiritual
turn
leader of
off.
the
It's
proposed
going to
Baptists here at the
another
Black
show.
Soweto Township, as well as the whites in their
Can I watch my show? You've been doing recording all day.
In a loud and a clear voice, enough of blood and tears. Enough.
The difficult decision we reached together was one that required great and exceptional courage.
How many pizzas were there?
It's an exodus
Two.
of up to 60,000
And
people
how can you only
squashed
get
by
two
the
sauces?
uneven pace of political change
Victor
in Eastern
got
Europe.
4. He never
Cut the
wanted.
pieces to half. Roughly 4. Divided into 4 slices.
Cut the pizza. Cut the pizza.
To Dobby, these are the top stories. Britain's main opposition Labour Party has elected the veteran left-winger Jeremy Corbyn as its new leader. In turn, he's called on the government to do more to help Europe's migrants. And rallies are being held across Europe, including here in London, in support of the migrants. Now, the predominantly Kurdish city of Jizre in Turkey is looking back to normality this weekend after more than a week.